Good morning. Welcome to our daily devotion. It is Wednesday, March 31st, the last day of the month. We'll be going into April tomorrow. I'm going to be reading Matthew 13, 31 through 35, another parable. Now, it's interesting. As you know, the Jewish people were looking for a savior, to save a king to save them, to overthrow the Roman Empire and to rule the world again. Good morning, Grace. So here Jesus is telling parables to explain, no, that's not what I'm about. I'm all about a different kingdom, a heavenly kingdom, not an earthly kingdom. And they didn't understand that, so he's using parables to try and explain it to them. Good morning, Grace. Good morning, John. So I'm going to read verses 31 through 35, another parable. Now remember, a parable is talking about something that they're familiar with to teach them something that they're not familiar with. So he says this, he told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it's the smallest of your seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and perch on its branches. Told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into a large amount of flour until it worked all through the dough. Jesus spoke of all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. So here Jesus uses planting seeds, which they were very familiar with, putting yeast in dough, which they were very familiar with, to make bread. But the question is, what does it mean? What does that mean? What is the kingdom of heaven? Why is that like the kingdom of heaven? Here's what I think, okay? I read commentaries and varied meanings. Morning, Paul. So many of them have different thoughts on what this means. So we're just as confused as the people back then at the time when Jesus was using these parables. And we have the full scriptures. So Jesus uses a mustard seed because his example because it's small. But when it's grown, it produces a large tree. Uses yeast, which even though it's a small part of the ingredients, it causes all the other ingredients to rise to make a much larger loaf of bread. So what I believe is that God can take a small, insignificant person and cause that person to grow a large gathering of believers. I'm certain that if you went back into your family history, you would find someone, a man, a woman, a grandpa, a grandma, someone that first made a decision to follow Jesus. And that mushroomed, that grew into a family tree. It grew into a tree to where now there's hundreds, thousands of family members now that know the Lord. I'm curious, Paul, if you went back into your family history, where it all started. Who was that first person that gave his life to the Lord to where you, your sisters and you and your parents and family all know the Lord? Where did that start? Where did that start? I believe this is what God is talking about, and it's not always a wise person, an intelligent person, a famous person, a successful person. It's not that at all. But so God can take one person to start a church or a ministry and grow it into a large ministry affecting numerous people. I think back to when I was young in my family. Now, my family was a religious family. They were very religious. We grew up as Catholics, never missed going to church, and etc. But I didn't know what it meant to have a personal relationship with Christ. So I proceeded to become a Christian. And as a result, now my family's all Christian. My personal family is Christians. And hopefully my grandchildren and great-grandchildren will become Christians. But it all started with one person, and then it just kept growing into a tree, into a loaf of bread. And many times, most times, it's someone that's just insignificant. It doesn't have to be someone famous. Let's look at this. And I know I've read this to you before, but maybe it'll make a little more sense to you now. In Acts 4:13, here's Peter and John giving this great speech, this speech that just cut the people to the bone. And it says, when they saw the courage of Peter and John, because they were threatening them and they didn't care, they kept on teaching. When they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished and took special note that these men had been with Jesus. Unschooled, ordinary men. And think of what God grew through them. We wouldn't be here as Christians if it weren't for the disciples continuing the ministry after Jesus left the earth. Ordinary, unschooled men. And they grew what we see here today with Christianity. And then in 1 Corinthians 1:26-29 says this, brothers, sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many of you were influential. Not many of you were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. He chose the lowly things of the world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one could boast before him. Wow. Does that sound like famous people to you? To me, that sounds like just ordinary, regular people like you and I, like you, Marcy, like you, Paul, like you, Grace, like me, Jim. Just ordinary, regular people. God used Moses powerfully, yet Moses stuttered and couldn't speak. And he told Jesus, I can't lead your people. I stutter. And that didn't keep God from using him. Remember, God looks at the heart. So if you have a heart for God, he can use you. And he can use you mightily. He can grow you into a tree. And then there's Paul. Mighty Paul, right? Well, I'm not talking about you, Paul Kandara. I'm talking about Paul in the Bible. Listen to what it says about Paul. It says, for some say his letters are weighty and forceful, but in person, he is unimpressive and his speaking amounts to nothing. You hear that? His letters are weighty, powerful, but in person he is unimpressive and his speaking amounts to nothing. He's not even a good speaker. He wasn't very impressive. And look what God did through Paul. Are you getting the picture now? Are you starting to get the picture of how God can just use regular people and use them in mighty ways, grow in large trees, like yeast grow in a loaf of bread? He can use us. He can use us powerfully. He used me. He used me. So why not you? I didn't start Collision Church until I was about 64 years old. 64 years old when God finally called me to start Collision Church. And now here we are getting ready to reboot and start over again and do something very different, meeting at a different time, meeting at a different location. 75 years old, God's using me. God's still, we all have excuses, don't we? We all have excuses. Oh, I would, but I'm too old to do anything now. Oh, I would, but I'm so busy. I've just barely got time to survive. I would, but I got a family I got to take care of. We all have excuses. We all they're not reasons, they're excuses. When I started ministry the first time, I had 4 children. I had a full-time job. And God used me. I think of using how He used Dawn. Used Dawn to build her ministry. I just saw on Facebook where her and her team made something like 80 sandwiches, gave out something like 50, 60 blankets and they were all excited. They're growing a tree. They help a few homeless people, and then a few more, and a few more, and a few more. Now here they are, almost taking care of 100 of them. Dawn. And then Dandy, using Dandy and his team. James and his parents, I should say James and Angel's parents. Sandeep's parents, his mom right now. Growing a tree. Just insignificant people, many times unschooled people. I was at a church where I'm not going to name it, where they told me I could not do adult ministry because I didn't have any seminary training, that I would have to go to a seminary. It would be like I'd have to quit doing ministry to go to a seminary for 6-8 years to learn how to do ministry. But God said, no, I can use you, Jim. I can use you without going to the seminary. And look, today, I don't have seminary training like many do. God's still using me. He can use any of us. Morning, Anna. He can use any of us, and powerfully. He can take you and grow you into a tree. He can put you into ingredients and cause the ingredients to rise like a loaf of bread. Are you willing? Are you willing to be used? No excuses. Now, some of you may have good reasons, but no excuses. And it doesn't have to be big things. Dawn didn't start out with a big thing. Dawn started out making a few sandwiches, putting in her car and going over and looking for homeless people to give a sandwich to. That's how she started. Dandy the same way. Dandy started buying a pizza and going out, finding a few homeless people and give them a couple slices of pizza. Who can't do things like that? Who can't start doing things like that? We all have something that we could do to grow a tree. Amen. God bless you. Tonight is our second youth group crash. Meeting at 7. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow at 8. Many of you have been praying for me. I don't know how much time many of you have been praying for me. I did not pass the test again. This test was harder than the first one. I'm starting to hear from people now where they're making the tests harder and harder and harder. And it was obviously so. So I'm going to have to raise my support now. So in closing, I'm looking for people that are willing to pledge a certain amount. Doesn't have to be a large amount. If I could get enough people to pledge enough where I could all I need is just enough to get by. I live a simple, humble life, so I can keep on doing ministry. So if that's something you'd like to do, just message me or text me or whatever. God bless you. Have a great day.